This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome this evening to our Fireside Chat. We're delighted you've joined us this evening, and we're blessed to have Happy, who represents CASA. We'll hear more about this wonderful agency that provides support to our youth. But before we do, let's just have a word of prayer. Gracious and glorious God, it is with gratitude that we assemble to share this conversation. We pray, Lord, thy blessing upon all of our youth. We pray we might be encouraged tonight as we hear the story of CASA. We thank you, God, for their commitment to make a difference in the lives of our youth. And we pray you'll be pleased with all that we seek to do here at Bethlehem, working with the people of God in our various communities. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ do we pray. Amen. I'm delighted, Happy, you're here. I love your name.
Thank you.
But I would ask that you would just tell us something about CASA.
Sure. So CASA is court-appointed special advocates, and I'm from our Philadelphia County program. So we're a local nonprofit, and we are a volunteer organization. So we recruit and train and support volunteers, community volunteers. You don't have to have any special background or requirements to give of your time to be an advocate for youth in foster care. So we're appointed by family court judges in Philadelphia County to be a voice for children in family court. So kids in the foster care system have lots of people involved in their lives. They have caseworkers, they have an attorney, they have maybe a therapist, they have their school counselor, they have all these other people. But some of those people don't have a lot of time to spend with them. And so a CASA volunteer is a person who is just going to work with that one child or one sibling group and be a constant person for them. So really the focus is that they get to know the child so that they can then look at what's going on around them in all the areas that they live and make best interest recommendations to the court. So they really bring information to the judge to help the judge make decisions, because you have a lot of other adults there talking about what they think is best and what's needed. And our volunteers really focused on what the child needs, what the child wants, and how we can make recommendations in their best interest to move the case forward.
Are these primarily foster care children?
All foster care children.
Foster care.
Yep.
How long have you been with CASA, and what really drove you to become part of this organization? What role do you play?
So I'm the executive director, and I've been at CASA for 5 years. I've worked in child welfare in the Philadelphia area for about 25 years. So that's really been my background, to work with children in foster care, group home, residential, as a social worker. And I came to this organization about 5 years ago, and it's really been a great fit because I've really considered myself to be an advocate, and I really think that being the head of a volunteer organization, these are really special people who give of their own time. They're not paid staff. And I think that makes such an impression on the young people that we work with. It's like, oh, you're here just because you want to be here, and you're here to get to know me and to help me out, and you're not getting paid for this. It's not your job. And I think that that is just such a powerful thing for children.
It's really interesting because I'm privileged to serve as a board member of Tabor. Are you familiar with Tabor?
I'm familiar with Tabor, yes.
And so also I'm chairperson of the board for Child Promise.
Okay.
That helps, again, with foster children. Are there any kind of particular cases that you have handled that are really meaningful? So what are the cases in terms of how volunteers work with the judge and the youth? What do those cases really look like?
What do they look like? So often we are, because we're a small organization and we can't serve all the thousands of kids in Philadelphia, we are sort of a resource that judges use selectively. And so often it's the really complicated cases. I would say we are frequently appointed to cases where there may be a lot of kids. So there's a lot of siblings. And if you have one attorney, it's really difficult for them to get out and know all of those kids and really see them in any capacity outside of court. So that's one, is big sibling cases. And in some of those cases, we may put a pair of volunteers on it, so it's not just one person, so they're working as a team. So that's one approach we take. We are also the educational decision makers for some older kids that are in foster care, who don't have a parent to make decisions for their special education needs. And so a lot of times those are older youth who don't really have anyone in their corner, don't have a consistent adult. And a lot of the other ones can be some of the more difficult child abuse cases, so where there's some pretty extreme situations. So while the child welfare system as a whole works very hard to get children home as quickly as possible, the primary goal needs to be reunification and to minimize the amount of time the kids are in what we call out-of-home care, foster care. Some of the cases that we get, because of the severity, that's not a possibility. So some of our volunteers are following children through on their journey through the child welfare system to finding permanency elsewhere, which may be with a foster family that becomes an adoptive family or becomes their legal guardian.
So tell me, what is the normal length of time that a volunteer would spend with a child, as well as what are the criteria for the volunteer?
Great question. So I'll start with what's sort of the requirements. So you need to be 21 years of age minimum. You need to be able to pass all the background checks that are required to be with and to work with children. So there's the FBI, the child abuse, and the police clearance. And then you need to come to one of our info sessions, and then if you're still interested after that, you can apply. We'll interview you, and then we will assign you to a training class. And the training is 30 hours of pre-service training. So we spend a lot of time training our volunteers before they even get close to meeting with somebody, because we want to really give them an understanding of the context of the system that they're going to be working within to advocate for the child. But I would say the biggest thing is really that the volunteer have the time and that they have an open mind and heart, because it's going to be challenging at times. It's not, all of our cases don't have easy wrapped up outcomes where you can kind of put a bow on it and say goodbye. So really it's having that time to be there every month for that child, no matter where they move to. And that's another big part of the role of the CASA volunteer. The child may have multiple caseworkers, changes even in judges and attorneys sometimes, but if that CASA volunteer is dedicated to sticking with that child no matter where they go, that's really just a huge comfort for those children to have that person. So in terms of your second question around time, we ask that volunteers, when they get into this role, that they have 2 years to commit to it, because that's the average amount of time. Some cases go much longer than that, some are shorter than that. So we have volunteers who give that amount of time, and then they do need to move on, and if it still needs another volunteer, we'll introduce a new volunteer. But we have volunteers who will stay on until the end, and sometimes that's 4 and 5 years until they see the child get to a permanency. And then we have volunteers that stay in touch with their children after that they've become kind of a part of that child's life and check in on them and know their foster family, know their adoptive family.
How many volunteers do you have as a whole?
So we have about 100 right now, and we serve about 300 children a year. We're looking to grow. We're always looking to recruit new volunteers because we're getting new ones in and some are leaving, and so it's a constant, process. But at any given time, we have about 100 during the course of the year.
And you just serve Philadelphia, you don't come to Montgomery County?
Right. We are Philadelphia. Well, kids may be placed, if they're placed from Philadelphia in Montgomery County, we will go to them in Montgomery County, but our kids all have to have cases in Philadelphia County. There is not currently a CASA program in Montgomery County.
So again, when you talk about cases, what kind of cases normally are the youth involved in that volunteers become part of?
So all of the cases have come through family court because there were allegations of abuse or neglect. And so they've been investigated and been opened by Philadelphia DHS, and out-of-home placement has been determined as necessary. So the kids are usually, by the time we're appointed, already in a foster home, a group home, or a residential program when we get involved.
So one of the questions that sometimes is raised with many of our community organizations, particularly those who volunteer, do you have any story? I wouldn't say success stories, but have you been able to see the blessings that have come from the volunteer working with the student to help that student regain a sense of integrity and fairness? Have you been able to see that?
Yes, definitely. I think that we really are great at our volunteers making sure that kids, that what's happening for kids it is not forgotten in court. It's kind of like, hey, we're talking about a child. It's not an abstract person. It's a real person. And bringing that humanity of that child to the court process by writing a court report that really explains who the child is as a person. And I think some of the things that we're really successful at are reminding people that, one, that they have connections, they have family connections, and sometimes those may get overlooked. And sometimes it's our volunteers who say, you know, this child really talks a lot about Aunt so-and-so, but hasn't been able to see her. And what can we do about that? And so we're sometimes trying to reconnect children with their family of origin, even if they can't live with them. Is there a way that those people can be involved in their lives? And we're the ones listening for those small things that don't seem very small, but sometimes they become small things in a big system like this, where we're focused on safety and, you know, the big things. So sometimes just those success stories are small, but they mean a lot to the child. And also just having your volunteers show up. If you have to move because something happened and you know your volunteer is going to show up and see you wherever it is that you go, that relationship really is an important thing. Just making sure we really are kind of like the hub, or like kind of paying attention to all the different areas in the child's life. So what I think our volunteers are really successful at is making sure things don't fall through the cracks. And that can help move a case along towards getting to permanency, whether that's going home or being adopted or moving into an independent living situation. It's like making sure all the pieces of the system that should be working towards that goal are working towards that goal.
One of the reasons why I wanted CASA to come as well, not only to get information about the program, but here at Bethlehem, we also have a family that is really committed to help foster children. It's called Beautiful Foundation. At the same time, we have foster children here. Mm-hmm. And how we minister to them and some of the challenges that they have are enormous.
Yes.
And sometimes they're forgotten.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative of this information you're sharing. At the same time, how can we as a church help? And tell me the balance in terms of ethnicity, in terms of the number of young people you have and the number of volunteers you have, and whether or not they are in keeping with a good match in that regard.
Yeah, unfortunately, in child welfare across the country, and it's true here in Pennsylvania as well as in Philadelphia, that the children in care are disproportionately children of color, primarily African American, and so that's something, you know, we're always looking closely at. What is the, you know, behind that, and how can we reduce that? And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't, you know, our volunteers we have a lot of volunteers who are very committed, but it is a mismatched demographic at this point. So the majority of our volunteers are white, majority are definitely women. Age range, we vary a little bit more in terms of from 30s to 60s and older. So we are really looking to diversify our volunteer base. And volunteering, volunteering with us is a big commitment. And so it's not for everybody. And secondly, it takes a lot of time. And so we know sometimes that people in the middle of their career, if they're squeezed between taking care of their own children and parents, it's a tough time to commit to an organization like this, which is why we do have some more older volunteers. But we think it's doable in terms of time. It takes about, we survey our volunteers to ask them to tell us about what time they commit to this every month, and it's about 10 hours a month. So we ask that you visit the child once a month. That's really the key thing, is seeing the child and having that building that relationship and establishing that trust with them. The rest of it can really be done by phone and email in terms of all the other outreach that you do. So it can be done from home.
I really am sorry that it's taken so long to learn about CASA. I grew up in Philadelphia. We still commit to our inner city. We're not that far from Philadelphia. Right. And I want to know, one, how do you, I guess, make yourself known, particularly to the minority community? And the only reason I've come to know about you is through one of our deacons, Deacon Angela Cooper, who expressed a great deal of enthusiasm and support for this kind of program to bring it to Bethlehem, to at least have people become aware of it. But how are you making sure that people know about CASA, particularly in the minority community, and what vehicle are you using to reach that community?
Yeah, we're working on it and meeting Angela at I think we met her at a mayor's volunteer program, and she was kind enough to introduce you. So we've been really working to try to get introductions, to get in front of new audiences, to spread the word. So a lot of CASA people know about CASA through word of mouth. It's sort of like, oh, my aunt did that in California. You know, somebody knows somebody often. So but we're trying to get beyond the word of mouth. We've been working on our social media outreach, our events. We do a speaker series focused on a topic related to child welfare, so we're trying to reach new audiences through that. But really, you having us here is part of our strategy to try to reach new audiences, so we really appreciate the opportunity.
What is your thought regarding all of the, I guess, violence and things in the city of Philadelphia among some of our minority members, African Americans and others? Has that impacted upon the overall program of volunteers reluctant to become connected, or what is taking place there?
Yeah, I mean, we have been affected directly. We know some of the children who have been victims of the violence recently, so it's really impacted our community of volunteers directly. But I think it only kind of reconfirms the resolve to help these kids have other opportunities and expose them to other opportunities, and to get all the resources that they're entitled to and that they deserve in order to get out of their situation. So I think in some ways it's really increased people's resolve. I do think there's a little bit of reluctance, especially if you're not familiar with the city, in terms of just coming in and showing up somewhere. But our staff will support our volunteers with that. They will make an initial home visit with them if they're nervous about that. So we try to do the best we can to kind of support people and getting over that nervousness. But yeah, that is a reality. Our kids live in some difficult situations and difficult neighborhoods.
One of the things that's really been a blessing, even with Child Promise, is that we have made a commitment to work with Kutztown University with foster care children, and the challenges there. These students have nowhere to go when the semester's over,
Yes.
and helping them with the books and things of that nature,
Yeah.
and getting their grade point average up and all those kind of things. And so there's really been some challenges, but there are many people, other agencies that are working around the clock to make that happen. And again, I'm sure, even though it's your position as the executive director, a sense of fulfillment. What fulfillment has come to you as a result of being the executive director?
That's a great question. I just really feel like it's a powerful thing to be able to have a volunteer be in the life of a child and our young adult. I mean, a lot of our teens really are the ones that I think we see that connection with. So for me, being the head of that organization, raising the money, having a great staff, we have an excellent staff that really love what they do and are really committed to be there to support these volunteers, and being the ones out in the community doing the work really brings me fulfillment. I just, again, having it be a volunteer organization is just a powerful thing, I think. And it's just really different from other things that I've done in this field in my career. So I really like the power of that volunteer aspect of it. And I think that, the volunteers just really bring their own personality, their own caring to the situation. And it's just really so gratifying to see them connect with kids and that child become, know that they can call on them. And our volunteer will answer the phone and they'll talk to them whenever they need them. So that is just a really gratifying thing to know that those kids have someone like that that's just committed of their own time to be there for them.
You mentioned you have about 300
Children.
Male, female, what is the ratio there?
It's about half-half.
Half-half.
Yeah.
Are there challenges in terms of how young men handle this, as well as young women, girls?
In terms of having a CASA volunteer? Interestingly, sometimes it's a little harder for them to connect to the girls than the boys. The girls have to, they really need to get to trust you, and they're going to test you out and make sure you're really there for the right reasons. And I've seen some of our female volunteers, older women, really connect with some of these young men in a way that's just really nice to see. It's just like, it's not like they're a mom figure. It's very clear that they're not, but they're just there for them, and they're caring, and I think just not being judgmental. You messed up, you made a mistake, let's figure out what to do and move on, and not like dwell on the mistake. And I think that has a really powerful effect also. So we've had some volunteers stick in there 5, 6, 7 years with some of these young men who have gone to Kutztown, for example, and some of the other programs. And so we really also try to make sure we know what other supports, like the Kutztown program has the Foster to College program. I was involved in the work group around the Foster to College program. So we definitely try to make sure that we're connecting our kids with programs that are going to support them into adult, because that early adulthood, 21 to 25 time, they still need a lot of support.
Do you have any foster adults who want to give back as a result of them being a foster child?
We have had some, and again, I think that's timing about when it's the right time in their life to give back. It can be very difficult, especially depending on the distance they have from their own experience. And we talk a lot about that in the screening process and training to make sure it's a good time for you, for your own mental health, because it can be a little overwhelming to be back in that situation. You're in a very different role and you have a different little bit of power, but it still can be difficult. So we definitely have some, but not a lot.
I remember serving as a volunteer for hospice, and one of the questions was in terms of time, so that are you able to get over your own grief?
Exactly.
So you move in another direction. At the same time, when we talk about our volunteers and their willingness to give back, how have you experienced those who volunteer, and what is the motivation for them volunteering?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the motivations are really personal. Coming from all different places. You know, we have some people, actually interesting around the foster care connection, we have some people who maybe their parents or grandparents were foster parents, so they have some familiarity with the foster care system and want to give back in a different way. I think people who just want to have a meaningful volunteer experience where they want to jump in a little deeper than doing a once in a while kind of thing, or show up on a Saturday, do a big group project. This is really a much more individual experience. So I just think a lot of times it's people looking for something meaningful where they can really give of their time. One of our longtime volunteers tells the story of how during the financial crisis, she works for a bank, and she just felt like there's got to be more to my life than this. And so that's how she looked into becoming a CASA volunteer, and she's been a CASA volunteer for about 11 years now, and she's now on our board. So people find us in different ways, but I think a lot of it is people looking for a real meaningful experience that's going to last for a period of time.
So I want to ask you another question that stays with me. And language is so important. And do you see any stigma regarding I'm a foster care child, or do you see the time coming when they will not have to be judged by a title or by a label?
Oh, I think there's definitely a lot of stigma still, and I think there's a lot of that has to do with the way foster care is portrayed in the media. I think it has to do with people's own feeling about foster care. I think there's a lot of biases, and I think kids feel that. They feel like they kind of have a stamp on their forehead, even though no one necessarily knows that they're in foster care, but they feel like everybody does. Or when that they find out that they're going to be judged for that. So I definitely think that's something that we're constantly dealing with for kids. Yeah.
Do you think the time will come when those labels will be removed and they still can serve?
I hope so. I mean, I hope the kind of programs like supporting kids going to college that are in foster care that remove those barriers, like where do they go when it's a Christmas break, and things like that make it more normal to identify your needs and say, I have needs and I need help with them, but I can still go to college. I think those kind of things are going to start breaking that myth about kids in foster care, really, that they're not going to amount to anything or whatever people think about it. Or, you know, even like saying, oh, those poor children. No, these are kids with potential, and we need to make sure we give them all the opportunities. And you know, there's so many barriers that they face, but stigma is definitely one of them.
So what are the ages again in terms of?
Yeah, so all ages. So we get kids from, you know, infants to, we follow them all the way, can follow them all the way to 21 if they're still involved in the system at that point. So some of our some of our older youth, if they come into care when they're older, if they have really special needs or in some specialized placements, are going to stay until they're 21, until they can transition to adult services. And so we will be with them all the way through to that. So we're involved in their transition planning. You know, if they have special education needs, they're going to stay in school until 21 and graduate based on their goals of their IEP. They may have intellectual disabilities or physical challenges that require them to live in a specialized placement. We're going to stay with them through that transition process into the adult side of things.
So, okay, I'm going to paint this picture and see if you can unravel this picture. I'm a foster young adult. I'm 20. I have been arrested for retail theft. What are the next step in terms of working with the judge, and tell us about how that process works.
So for a child who's already in foster care when that happens?
For a child who's already in foster
care. So actually in Philadelphia, they started what's called a crossover court. So if you're a child with dependency issues who you can't live with your parents and you get arrested, you're most likely going to find yourself in what's called crossover court, which will handle your delinquent charge or your criminal charge as part of your dependency case. And if you work your way through that process, the charges will be expunged, and you'll stay in the dependency side. Unless it's really, if it's a shoplifting, it's going to be that kind of thing. If it's a violent crime, it may end up becoming a delinquency situation. But there's really been an effort to try to help kids who are in foster care who are on the dependency family court side that have arrests like that, like the retail theft, to get through that and not have a record.
So the judge appoints?
So the judge is going to follow the case, and there'll probably be a probation officer, but they will work with the dependents, with the caseworker from the child welfare side. If CASA is involved, which we often are on some of those, going to support the child through that. And their attorney would be involved. They have an attorney also.
Does a judge ever recommend CASA?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and a lot of those we get involved because there's education, there's stuff going on with school that really needs to be unraveled. And so that especially in Philadelphia, that's a lot of the time the way our CASA program gets involved with some of those older youth is to help sort out what's going on. You know, you're a teen, you're supposed to be in school all day. That's your job. You go into school, right? And a lot of them are not. And there's been all kinds of reasons why. They maybe have moved around so many times that they're behind and they're embarrassed about it. They may have a learning disability that's never been diagnosed. They may have emotional needs that are so triggering for them in class that they're getting in trouble all the time. So we are really involved in advocating for those kids to get the right services to be successful in school. And some of those kids get in trouble with the law, and when you dig a little deeper, you find out there's all these other things going on. And if we could put some other things in place for them, we can get them off that path.
So not to stigmatize our youth, but given the fact that foster children already have been abandoned and carry that pain, how are they receptive to someone who they may not know who's come to assist them in this journey?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It just varies. Kids have such different personalities. You know, some kids are really welcome and open to it. Some are very skeptical. Some are so used to people coming in and out of their lives that they just sort of don't even notice initially. And then that's when they have that moment that's like, oh, wait a second, you're a volunteer? So, you know, that person may have been there for 6 months and they haven't really kind of figured that, gotten it, because there's so many kids, so many people involved in their lives. You know, I think this example of, we had a CASA volunteer who had been a public school teacher for 30 years and in Philadelphia. And she knew she had kids who were in foster care in her classroom, but she didn't really know what that meant in terms of all the things that happen outside of school. And when she became a CASA volunteer, she said, it just blew my mind that there were all these people involved and attached to this child. And she said, as a teacher, I had no idea that there were so many people. And so I think there's all these people working around the case, and it's confusing for kids. And so sometimes our volunteer can just be that person who sits with them when they go to court and just plays games with them and is like a constant, and can also help maybe translate what's going on for them because they've built that relationship with
So
them.
they meet him in the courtroom?
They will go to court. Yeah, our volunteers go to court, and kids are required to come to court twice a year. The judge wants to see them.
So is that the only interaction they have with the young person at court, or do they have other opportunities outside of the courtroom?
Our volunteers?
Yes.
Oh, no, our volunteers are going to where they live and
Okay.
seeing them monthly. So they have a relationship with them outside of
Okay.
court. Most of their relationship is outside of court. Court is just a really small part of their relationship with them. But they're just an extra support when the kids do need to come to court to be there with them.
So if they have a foster parent, how does a parent as a whole respond to the volunteers?
Yeah, that's another relationship building. I think foster parents are overwhelmed too with a lot of people coming in and out of their home. And so we have to do, again, it's relationship building with the adults and the biological family as well. So our CASA volunteers, if the goal is reunification, they're going to meet the parents, they're going to observe the parents with their children, they're going to see how that relationship is, what's working well, what's not. So they really have to work on building trust with everybody in that child's inner circle. So foster parents and biological parents.
So has CASA been able to develop a good relationship with the court system?
We have a very good relationship with the court system. So we really serve at the pleasure of the family court system. We have to, demonstrate to them that we're a really great organization that trains our volunteers well, that supervises them well, that we do what we say we're going to do. And so we do have a really good relationship with family court, and the judges. Really, there are times when they're like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get CASA on this case. So that's really gratifying to know that they will rely on us, and sometimes they will listen to everybody else in the courtroom, and then they'll wait till the end, and then they'll ask CASA if there's anything else they want to add that was missed. And meanwhile, they've read our report ahead of time, so they kind of have an idea what concerns there may be, and that can help them also know what questions to ask.
It takes a great deal of commitment to be a foster parent,
Yeah,
as well as a volunteer.
Absolutely.
How do you recognize the volunteers?
That's a good question. We're always trying to come up with new ways of recognizing the volunteers. I just sent them all Thanksgiving cards, and we're trying to recognize their birthdays and really try to, when something good happens, try to celebrate that with them, be there for them when something tragic happens. Like I said, we were recently touched by some of the violence that happened, and we really rallied around our volunteer. We do... Well, COVID makes it a little more difficult to get together, but during COVID, we were doing weekly Zoom meetings so volunteers could engage with each other and with us and stay in touch. I think that's another big part that we try to offer, because being a volunteer can be a little lonely. You're the one person, with your supervisor from the staff dealing with that case. And so we really try to provide opportunities for volunteers to get to know each other. They go through training together, which is kind of intensive. So we have cohorts of training, and those people make friendships and stay in touch with each other and support each other. And that's another way where some of our volunteers kind of have a connection with another volunteer in training, and they decide they want to work a case as a pair. So there's a number of different ways that we try to keep them engaged with us as well as with each other to be supportive of them.
Well, as an organization, do you do much networking with other agencies that are doing similar things or different things? Yeah,
we're part of the network of the CASA programs across the state, and so I'm actually on the board of Pennsylvania CASA right now. So there's a state organization that's working to support the local organizations in the state and open more. We're working to get CASA programs in other counties that don't have CASA programs. When we attend lots of meetings where we're part of the team. So in Philadelphia, we meet with what are called the community umbrella organizations that are administering child welfare services under Philadelphia DHS. We meet with Philadelphia DHS. We're part of the advocate community, so there's a couple of other organizations, so we meet with them regularly. So we do a lot of networking around that. I mean, we advocate for individual kids, but obviously we see systemic problems, and we are always working to bring those to the attention of people that can do something about it. So I see ourselves doing both. That's kind of my role. It's like I'm taking in the information that I'm hearing about individual cases, and if I see, see this is not just a problem individual to this case. This is more of a systemic problem, and so we do advocacy around those systemic issues with our partners.
So something else you said as well, because you mentioned that in Montgomery County, there's no CASA, but then you also mentioned the state. So are there other counties in the state that have CASA programs, Bucks County and other counties?
Yes, Bucks and Montgomery both do not. We would love to get in there, but Delaware and Chester County both do. They're run by Delaware, Chester County CASA, and I'm a great relationship with them. We have shared resources. We've trained our volunteers together, so we also do those kind of things as well. Work together to lobby for money for CASA at the state level. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states in the whole country that doesn't receive any funding from the state. So we're working to try to change that. That's going to be a big part of helping sustain the level that we're at and also grow. So most of the CASA programs are nonprofits. Some are under an umbrella agency, and a few are connected to their county. Ours is a nonprofit, so we have to raise the money, get grants, and get funding to keep going and to grow.
So that's the question I want to raise, and you just mentioned that about funding and as a nonprofit. So what would be your budget, and how are you continually, creating the opportunity for people to give to support the program?
Yeah, so we do receive some money through the county. We fundraise, we grant write, and we have individual contributors. So we're working to increase all of those all the time. We've been able to grow to where we are because of mostly foundation support and fundraising. So those are things I'm continually working on, is finding new opportunities to sustain the growth that we've had in the last 5 years, and also to serve more kids. We'd love to be bigger. There are more children that could use our services.
So where's your office located, and then what is the staff made up of? How many persons on the staff?
So we're located right in Center City, Philadelphia. We rent office space in the Friends Center building, which is right behind Family Court at 15th and Cherry. And our staff right now is 8 full-time and 3 part-time staff. So that's myself, a program director, we have 5 supervisors, and then we have the staff that help with the onboarding and training and supporting the volunteers, just the recruitment through training process. We do training 4 times a year. We do twice a year in the daytime and twice a year in the evening. We're adding an extra session in January. We're going to be doing a day and an evening session simultaneously. During COVID, we moved our training. We usually do it all in person at our offices, but during COVID, we moved it all to Zoom and did it all virtual. And in October, we decided to try to do it hybrid, because we really missed seeing people in person. It's just, you miss something. And so in October, we had our first successful hybrid class, where 1 day a week they came in and we trained together in a room together, and then they did the second session of the week on Zoom. And so we split it up that way, and I think it really went well, and so we're going to do that again in January.
If you were to name your biggest challenges in the last 5 years as executive director, what has that been?
I would say funding has really been a big. We've been very stable and we've grown, but as we grow, it's like the commitment to keeping that coming in and not knowing always where that's coming from is a big challenge. I think we've done a great job of continually recruiting volunteers, and we've been able, through a grant, to have a dedicated person, and that's really helped us in the last 2 years to get our reach, get larger classes. So I think we're incrementally working on those things, but really to sustain it, the funding is a huge part of it. And you get a lot for a little with us, because it's a volunteer organization. So you think we have 11 staff supporting 100 volunteers who are supporting 300 children. So it's not a very expensive program in that way, because really it's the volunteer time that's our biggest asset.
Well, I've never had a chance to meet Claudia, but I felt her enthusiasm and zeal as I spoke to her over the phone, and I hope that she represents the commitment of the staff. She's very
Absolutely.
engaged and
Yeah.
just seems to be very committed to the program itself, and I think that's positive that you have a staff.
Our staff is very dedicated, and they're all very enthusiastic, and quite a few, about 4 of them came to CASA through volunteering, and now work for us.
Okay.
So, you know, there are people who really have a commitment to it. And then our other staff are trained social workers who really wanted to work in child welfare, and so they're really committed to that, the children as well.
So your staff is diverse?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Well, it's changed. Yeah, in terms of yes, it is. You can look on our website and see everyone's picture, and difference in ages and experience and background. And we're diverse in that way.
I think
Our
that's
board
so
of directors as well, also, and we're really making an intentional effort around recruiting, about retention, and in terms of our staff and our board.
So how many persons on the board?
13 right
13
now.
on the board. How was the board recruited?
Number of different ways. Through board members, but also we're a member of the Diverse Force board training program, the Philadelphia Bar Foundation board leadership program, and Leadership Philadelphia. We get a lot of good people who go through Leadership Philadelphia. We've gotten quite a few board members through them as well. And then we've also had we had some gaps to fill in terms of skill set, and we've really had gone out and looked for people that could fill that need on the board.
Are any of the board members themselves foster experiences?
Not at the moment. We have one who's been a volunteer for a number of years. We have people who've had some connection to foster care. We've definitely had board members who we had one board member. She's moved on. She moved out of state, but she had a CASA as a child. So yes, we have had that, and it is definitely an area we'd like to have somebody on the board.
I don't know if I asked you this question, but you also mentioned something here again. How long has CASA been working? When did it begin?
So CASA started in 1977 in Seattle, Washington, with a Judge Sukup, who became a family court judge and just sort of had this realization that he doesn't know much about these kids that are coming in front of him, and how am I going to make decisions about them if I don't really know anything about the kids? And at that point, kids in foster care weren't required to have an attorney representing them. So the parents had attorneys, but the kids didn't. So that was really the beginning of the child advocacy movement in the child welfare system. So he started that he had this idea to bring in community volunteers to do that. And that has spread across the country. And now I think there's like 950 local programs in 49 states. In Philadelphia, our program has been in existence since 2006.
So 2006, you've been in existence.
Yeah, in Philadelphia County.
How often does the board meet?
Every other month, and sometimes more if needed.
And the staff meets, and you meet with the staff on a regular basis?
Yes. I see staff and I live and work in very close quarters, so we see each other all the time. We're a very tight-knit staff, and there's a lot of support that's needed because our cases can be complicated. There's a lot of knowledge and resources that we all bring to it, and so we work really hard to share that with each other. But we have a formal meeting every other week, but now that we're back in the office, we're seeing each other in person a lot as well. And our staff are seeing our volunteers. They're communicating with them our staff are seeing the volunteers, are talking to them at least twice a month, and then they do go to court with them as well. So they're providing that support.
Does CASA work with the local political leaders, city council and mayor and all those things? Do you work with those?
Yeah, we definitely have some relationships with some of the people on city council who are very supportive and know of us. The mayor knows of us. We work closely with DHS, so the commissioner. So yeah, we're involved in that way for sure. Yeah.
How do you respond when there is a neglect from one of the agencies, as we've seen on several occasions?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a duty as we're mandated reporters, so if there's something that we have seen, heard, suspect, we report it. And we definitely have seen some of the issues that have come out in the news and had children at those programs. So yeah, it's really heartbreaking to hear some of the things that have happened. But I think that's another value that CASA brings to kids in this situation. They're going to those places and seeing them as well. And so if they're picking up on something or the child is disclosing something to them, that's another trusted person that they can disclose that to, who they know is going to do something about it.
Where does the name CASA come from?
So it came from, he just named it Court-Appointed Special Advocates, and they shortened it to CASA. So I know we get a lot of calls of people thinking we're a housing program because of CASA, so I feel bad about that. But I'll try to get them to the right place. Yeah.
So that's what the name originated from?
Yeah, it's just Court-Appointed Special Advocates.
Who was the founder?
So Judge Sukup in Seattle in Kings County was the founder of it. And then the national office is now there. So there is a national organization that we're a member organization of. So they have a standard of practice, and we're a member organization where we use the national curriculum to train the volunteers. And there's the model of the visitation and the role of what the CASA volunteer is in terms of collecting the information in order to make a report and make best interest recommendations. So that's the model on a national scale. Then each of the individual programs, works within their community in a different way. Different communities are different. How they're going to fundraise in different communities is going to look different. Those kind of things. So. Do
you have a major fundraiser plan for 2022?
We do. We have a plan. We had been doing 2 fundraisers a year. We had added a gala, and we just had a really great big gala in May of 2019, and we're just 2 months away from our big one in 2020 when everything shut down. So we had moved to just doing a virtual fundraiser. We just did a night of reggae. We're pleased to partner with our neighbors across the river with Camden County CASA. So we went across state lines, and Camden County CASA and Philadelphia CASA did a joint fundraiser at World Cafe in October, and we had a night of reggae and raised money at that. And we're going to be looking at whether we're going to do our big fundraiser in May, either in person or whether we're going to move to virtual. We got to make a decision about that soon.
What kind of fundraiser would that be?
So that'll be a gala. That'll be a big event where we give out awards, and we'll have a keynote speaker, have a silent auction. People can always give on our website, and we take donations. A lot of funds come in through individual donors. So our website is philadelphiacasa.org.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember.
Right. Easy to remember.
I'm sorry, it's CASAPhiladelphia.org. I said that wrong.
Okay.
CASAPhiladelphia.org. If you just Google CASA Philadelphia, we'll pop right up. We have a donation page. We have lots of information on our website, resources too, so it's a great place to check out also if you're just interested.
I was drawn by these words, change a child's story.
Yeah, that's the national branding, current branding thing. And it's really like we see ourselves as being able to help change that story. Like you talked about the stigma around foster care. We can really bring a different story to the forefront, that these kids are real people with real lives and real things that they care about and they want, and goals and aspirations. And we can help change that if we give them the opportunity.
Have you received any correspondence from some of the foster children who have been involved with CASA and felt that they were certainly supported? Are there any letters or any kinds of notes or things you have received from any of the young people that you have?
I would say that it doesn't come through to the organization, but it comes through to their volunteers. They stay in touch with their volunteers, and they will tell us that they've heard from them. So I was just speaking to one of our volunteers recently who worked with a teen who's now in his 20s, and she worked with him through, I think, about 8 school plans, but got him to graduate. And I think he's now at 25 understanding why she was so committed to getting him through high school. And so he thanks her now. Like, thank you for staying on me, basically, through that. Because I don't think he knew it was important, but didn't have the same perspective as you do when you look back on it. And I think he knows now that things that he's been able to do in his 20s, he wouldn't have been able to do if he didn't have that diploma. So those kind of stories that come through our volunteers. And it's great when our volunteers can be at the court when an adoption is finalized and the family invites them to be part of that, and they feel like they are part of changing that story. They've been there all along the way to see this new family formed when kids get adopted also, or when they go home. And which is, when that happens, it's just such a great thing to see happen when a family is able to be reunified, and things are different than they were.
I really appreciate this time of having this conversation with you. Time goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
The hour is just about to conclude. But what would you say to our congregation as they have been privileged to watch? What words would you want to leave about CASA?
So I would say help spread the word. We would love more people to know about the organization. We would love for you to consider volunteering. We definitely need more volunteers. And if you're interested, please visit our website, CASAPhiladelphia.org, and you can sign up for an information session with Claudia, our recruiter, and she will kind of give you the overview of what's required, answer any of your questions to see if it's a good fit for you. Also, keep it in mind it's something that maybe is not good for you right now, but maybe in a few years you may have more time. We definitely have people who do that as well. They think about it, they're like, it's been on my mind to do this, and now it's a good time. And so I would say just keep spreading the word that we're out there. We're all over the state, so you can go to the PA CASA website also to find other organizations if you live further from the city and want to find an organization that's closer to you. So that's what I would say, and you can make a difference. It can be challenging and frustrating, and it has its ups and downs, but I think it's really rewarding if you go into it and stick with it.
Our mission here at Bethlehem is love God and serve people, and we take that very seriously. And so, again, I want to thank you, and then just ask that you would stay in touch with us. I know that we can support your gala in May.
Great.
And maybe other opportunities we have, particularly in terms of reaching out to seek to get some volunteers, but to become more knowledgeable about the program itself. We may not be able to volunteer, but maybe somebody else,
Yes.
or how we can encourage others to be supportive of our foster care children.
Absolutely.
Who have so many challenges.
Yes,
So I want to
absolutely.
thank you, I want to thank your organization, and pray that in 2022 that you'll soar in ways that you never soared before.
Thank you so much.
So I really appreciate your coming today, and the best of everything to you. And I want to thank our congregation because, again, we use this Fireside chat to provide opportunity for those in the community to come and share with us. We don't just want to serve people here at Bethlehem, but we want to serve God's people wherever they may be, whether it's in Philadelphia or Kentucky or someplace else. We want to make sure that these walls are not confined, that we reach out beyond these walls and do the work of the kingdom. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really
we
appreciate it.
look forward to continue working with the wonderful things that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So let me conclude this evening by thanking you for joining us every Sunday evening. We have the Sunday with the pastor, and then on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, as you've just witnessed, we have the opportunity for a fireside chat. Sunday morning, we have 9 a.m. and 11:15 a.m. services. And in spite of this pandemic, we are continually serving God and moving beyond our own expectations and doing things we've never done before. So this is a wonderful opportunity to share with someone. Tell someone, Thursday evening, join us. Sunday evening, join us. Sunday morning, join us. And prayerfully, our lives will be blessed as we have been blessed this evening, knowing about CASA, as well as that opportunity God has given to us to bring others to this fireside chat. Have a great evening. Thanks again. God bless you.